Today, we're going to be talking about some of the books I'm the most excited to read in 2026. I have a bit of a stack next to me. I'm not going to hold it up again, considering how well that turned out in my best of 2025 video, but there's a bit of variety. We have books that are in series I'm planning to finish this year in 2026, some series I'm looking forward to starting and reading in this year, and then I'm ending it with a couple of standalones. Alright, let's just dive right into it. First up, well, there's no particular order in terms of like how excited I am to read any of these books. But starting off with the books in series I'm going to finish this year, or hoping to finish this year, it's The Final Gambit. This is the third book in the Inheritance Games trilogy. I read the first two the last couple of years. The first one, The Inheritance Games, was in my top 5 of 2024. And then Hawthorne Legacy, not as good as the original, but I still had a lot of fun with it in 2025. And in 2026, I'm gonna finish up with The Final Gambit. Throughout the series, we've been figuring out like a little bit more about the characters and how specifically Avery is connected to the Hawthorne family, specifically with the grandfather who died and left her everything. And now we're gonna ultimately figure out, answer all the last questions in this mystery series. So, and then, the trilogy will be over, but I still will have the Brothers Hawthorne spin-off to read later on. And hey, maybe I'll also get into the spin-offs. So, yeah. Next up is a duo of books, but we have the How to Train Your Dragon, Book 11, How to Betray a Dragon's Hero, and then Book 12, which is the final book in the series, How to Fight a Dragon's Fury. So, in case you're not familiar, the How to Train Your Dragon movie by DreamWorks is actually a adaptation of the book series by Cressida Cowell. And I put adaptation in loose quotes because if you've read the book and watched the movies, you know they have basically nothing in common other than it's about a guy named Hiccup who has a dragon named Toothless. They're both on the island of Berk, they're Vikings, and some characters share the same names in similar roles. But anyway, putting all that aside, I've been reading through the series for the last couple of years, and we've seen how the characters have grown up. You've had some more silly little side quests in the first half, but now we're getting a little bit deeper. Hiccup is in danger of losing everything, essentially, because you have Albin the Treacherous. He is trying to take over, and I'm excited to see how the series ends, and I'm hoping that everything turns out relatively well for Hiccup, and any questions that were left unanswered by the end of Book 10 will be answered in here. Although I might be a little sad. It's been a wild ride across these now 12 books. Return of the Thief is the final book in the Queen's Thief series, and it's a very interesting series when you look at it structurally. The thief is Eugenides, or Gene, as he's called in the first book. However, if you were to break down how much of the series is told from his perspective, you'd only get maybe 2 or 3 books out of 6, but specifically, first book, The Thief, all about him first person's perspective, and then the second book, it's third person omniscient. You do have Gene's perspective, but you also get to hear a little bit from his future wife, and a little bit from, I believe, his cousin, and then he's not the point of view character at all in The King of Atolia. I believe he's a little bit with Conspiracy of Kings, but it's more focused on Solstice, I believe is his name. And then going to Thick as Thieves, he's not really he's not too present in it. But I think that's what makes the ending this series so interesting is we're gonna be seeing Gene, but we don't how is everybody else gonna fit in? And what does the ending of their stories entail? So that's why I'm really excited to read Return of the Thief and see kind of like how does it wrap up for everybody, and was this book going to be like structurally and like tonally, because there is such a diversity across the series. Next book I'm going to be talking about, I don't have a physical copy with me, so I'll be putting it up somewhere on the screen, but it is Eldest. This is the second book in the Inheritance cycle, which, you know, the first book was Eragon. I read it last year, loved it, and I'm super excited to see what happens next. We've met a lot of characters. We've seen how Eragon has grown from, you know, just like this quiet farm boy who's just trying to survive. Finds an egg, the dragon's egg, not knowing at all it's a dragon's egg, having no intentions for it to do anything. But then by the end, he's grown a close bond with Saphira. He's met other people who know more about dragons than he has. And what I said in my favorite books of 2025, I'm excited to see what happens with them. Like what is expanded upon on how does his relationship with not just Saphira, but other characters like Murtagh grows. So, yeah. So that's all I have to say really about Eldest. I'm excited to see what happens with Eragon and Saphira. Now we're in kind of a weird limbo area of the video where we're in new series, but there are also parts of old series I finished. But first of all, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is the spin-off series to Caraval, which I read last year and absolutely adored. The series follows Jax, who is a character in the original Caraval trilogy. We specifically met him in the second book, Legendary, and saw a little bit more of him throughout in Finale. But now he's the male main character of this trilogy, and he gets a little bit of a love story. And I've heard a lot of really good things about it. Some people love this more than Caraval and say, like, you can just, if Caraval weren't so important to, like, creating the structure, you can just dump right into Once Upon a Broken Heart. I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel about this, but if this is, I would say half as good as Caraval, but half as good would be 2.5 stars, which is not very good. But if this is, let's just say a 3/5 as good as Caraval, which, so 3 out of 5 stars. But anyway, it's by Stephanie Garber. It's in the Caraval franchise. I feel like I will have fun with this, and I look forward to reading it. Another series that I don't physically have right now, but I'm talking about right now, it is the Stolen Heir duology. It is the sequel spin-off to the Cruel Prince or the Folk of Air trilogy, and it takes place many years after the original trilogy ends. Oak, who is the true heir to Fairy, he is now older. In the original trilogy, he was a little kid. But now we're going to see an older Jude, an older Cardan. We'll see a little bit like, how is the world different? How have they grown? How has their relationships with other characters been? And I think it's going to be interesting seeing a little bit of Oak in this one, because in the original, once again, he's a little kid, but now he's gonna be a teenager. You have to deal with like how he sees the world is going to be different from how he was originally. Now we're on to the series that do not have anything to do with books I read earlier in 2025 or ever, I think. But first up, we have The Huntress of Thornbeck Forest, and the 2 companion novels, The Beautiful Pretender and The Noble Servant. These are all by Melanie Dickerson, and they are medieval-esque. There's a little right here, it says, a medieval fairy tale. And as somebody who has always loved fairy tales and enjoys a good medieval Renaissance setting, I'm really excited to read about it, and the premise of these stories really intrigued me, where there is romance, and you have specifically with the first book, it talks about how it's about this woman who is breaking the law in order to save the poor. So a little bit Robin Hood-esque, and it seems as though her love story is with the adversary. So I'm really excited about this. I feel like if I simply enjoy the vibes, even if the story isn't amazing or is really cliched, I feel like I will have a really wonderful time with the series. Emily Wilde, Encyclopedia of Fairies. If you've been listening to me for a while now or know me well, you know I love fairies. I talk a little bit more in my Wings of Starlight review, but I grew up with fairy movies and books. And I feel as though sometimes they can be a little underrepresented in the media. And hearing about how the story is about a woman who knows a lot about fairies, but she's a little bit more awkward in her everyday life with humans, that really intrigues me. My cousin actually gave me this for Christmas, and she was the one who recommended Sorcery of Thorns, which I absolutely adored. So, Larissa, if you're listening to this, I completely trust anything that you recommend me. So I hope that Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and the 2 sequels, I hope that I love them a lot. In 2024, I watched the movie Howl's Moving Castle for the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it, especially after rewatching it for the second time. And when I found out that it's inspired by a book series, well, specifically the first book in the series, I believe the second 2 are more spin-offs, stories, I was really intrigued by it. I've heard a little bit about it, specifically how the movie is more like how Howl sees everything, while the books are more like how Sophie sees everything. And it might end up being a little bit of a How to Train Your Dragon situation where the book and movie share not a whole lot in common. You have similar characters and maybe a little bit of a setting and the plot points, but generally you could rename all the characters and locations and give them a different name, and it's a completely different story. But I think even if that's the way Howl's Moving Castle is, along with the companion novels Castle in the Air and House of Many Ways, I think it's going to be really fun seeing what the source material for a movie I fell in love with is like. Princess of the Midnight Ball, it is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, and while I didn't necessarily grow up too much with the traditional fairy tale, the Barbie version was a movie I watched continuously as a child. And I have such a soft spot for anything princessy, fairy tale related, and also the cover. Look at this. It's really beautiful. I absolutely had to check it out, and I plan to get the other 2, I don't know if they're sequels or companion novels necessarily, but I feel as though if this has the vibes that I'm looking for and a well-written story, I will have a lot of fun with this, and it may even make it onto my top 10 or top 20 of the list. Listen, I've read more than 50 books this year. Top 20 is not an insult, okay? Now we make it to the standalone section of this video, and we're starting off with Northanger Abbey. This is a Jane Austen novel. It's arguably her least well-known of her 6 main completed novels, but I feel as though that doesn't mean it's gonna be bad. I've read all 5 of her 5 other novels over the last couple of years, and I've generally had a really good time. In my favorite classics video, I talk about my 3 favorites, which is Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Persuasion. And this one's a little bit different, apparently. It's sort of a gothic mystery satire, and I really love gothic mysteries, and satire, when done wonderfully, is just so good. And I'm excited to finally finish reading off all of Jane Austen's novels and get into the ones that aren't as recognized by the public. Speaking of gothic mysteries though, that brings us to the last book I'm going to be talking about, which is Rebecca. I have not read this like all the other books that I talked about today, but I have seen the Alfred Hitchcock movie that came out in 1940. I absolutely loved it. It's a story of a woman who gets married to this mysterious dashing widower who was married to a woman named Rebecca. And throughout it, she's like very curious. She's not entirely sure. Some characters aren't treating her the best, and she's apparently obsessed with her husband's late wife. And similar to other book to movie adaptations I've talked about, I don't know how similar the book is to the Alfred Hitchcock film, but I feel as though if it captures the similar vibes, captures this mystery, this will be a lot of fun, and especially because I really love the gothic aesthetic. And my capstone, which I have now started sharing with all of you, is very gothic leaning, and the Hitchcock film was one of the influences for that story. So those are the books I am most excited to read going into 2026. I hope that I have fun with all these, whether they make me laugh, make me nearly cry, and you know what? If they disappoint me, maybe I'll do a reaction of this old video and just cringe at how wrong I was with everything. So, if you enjoyed this, please share with your friends. I'm Louisa Hammond, and I'll see you next time.